Okay, we're back for another installment. This is part 8 of the Bob's Life session, number 3. So it's number 3, part 8. And the date is August 3rd, 2016. And we're going to take off where we left off before. We got another half-hour installment, and the reasons we're doing these in half-hour installments is partly because of my phone. That's about the limit that my phone will allow for recording. Doing this on a Samsung Galaxy, and also it's just as well because most people won't have a lot of time, and so we wanted to make them in increments that weren't too long, too daunting. All right, so take it away, Bob.
Okay. We left off, we were in the beginning of the 1980s. I wanted to step back just to give a little oddity. When I was teaching school in elementary school, north of the town where I lived, a number of strange things happened. On one occasion, I caught my foot on a fan cord. We didn't have air conditioning in the school, and it was Florida, sweltering hot. And and I started to fall, and there was no way to stop it. I mean, I was going to go down. I mean, there was chalkboard to my left, and that's the direction I was falling in, with my face towards it. Pencil sharpener, my face would have hit first, and then the chalk tray next. I would have ended up in stitches, and perhaps in the hospital, perhaps not, but at least with stitches. All of a sudden, I wasn't falling. I was going upward. And at such a rate that the cord that had caught across my foot snapped off. It didn't break the cord, but I mean it pulled off very quick, snapped off of my foot. I then landed. I turned around and looked at my students, and a lot of them were looking kind of strange. So I went over to one guy and I said, could you tell me what just happened? I was falling down, wasn't I? And he said, well, yeah. And I said, did I float after that? And he said, you just kind of raised up in the air. And he looked back down at his paper. I was shaking and weak feeling. I wasn't injured anyway. I didn't fall. I think whatever energy field was necessary to lift me. This was a levitation. Wasn't planned, but maybe it drained me, and I was shaking, weak, and tired for a little bit. Another occasion, a large wasp came into the room, and of course the kids were all swatting at the wasp, and I told them, don't do that. I'll send it out the same window it came in, but I don't want it to sting anyone. We had a whole wall full of windows, and they were all open because, again, Florida and hot, no air conditioning. The wasp flew around, and I started directing it, and it flew right back out the window that it came in. At that point, one of the kids said, are you a warlock? And I said, no, just about as opposite of that as you can get. Another kid said, are you a witch? And the first kid piped up and said, that's what I was asking, a male witch is a warlock. And I said, no to both. I couldn't come out and tell them, who I really am, because oh God, I would have been crucified a lot younger in this life. This is just some of the strange things that happened when I was teaching elementary school. At any rate, in early 1980s, I began teaching at the local sheltered workshop for the mentally handicapped adults. And I had some funny things that happened there, as well as strange. What's new about that? I remember one day we had one heck of a rainstorm, typical cold front coming through Florida in one November morning. It was on a Friday morning, in fact. And I started to walk to the office, the building that had the office in it next door to where I was teaching. So I told my teacher's aide to watch over my class while I took some paperwork over next door. Well, there was this big puddle, real big. And I stopped for a moment and thought, well, I can go around it, no problem. But then I thought, why not put all this wisdom and training and everything to use? Why not try something? So for a brief few moments, and I didn't concentrate on this, if I had, it would not have worked. I just accepted the fact that the water was like ground. And without thinking about it, like you don't think when you're walking across the ground, I walked 2.5 steps across the water. It was almost like a little bit like semi-flimsy solid plastic. Got to the other side of the puddle, went on to the office, came back, thought I'd do the same thing without even preparing my mind for it or anything. Walked right onto the puddle, and it went up over my ankles and into my feet, all around my shoes and my feet. Cold, very cold and wet. I got back in my classroom, and one of my students said, "You walked in the puddle, didn't you?" And all I could answer was, "Yeah." He comes back with, "Is it wet?" And I said, "Yeah, it's wet and cold." I believe I talked about the time already when I was hit by lightning. Right, Paul? While I was teaching
I'm trying to, one of the times you talked, yeah, one of the times.
Right. There's just a number of strange things that happened there. I had one student who, when roll call would be done, would come to his name and he'd say, "Oh, Bob, he's dead." And I'd look at him and say, "Really?" And he'd get this sheepish grin on his face. The days there were amazing, and to be able to teach there was fulfilling. It was some of the most fulfilling teaching I've done in this lifetime. I could walk into the classroom in the morning, maybe even be in a down mood about something. And yes, I do get in down moods at times. Everybody does. It's part of the quality of being human in this world. And it was not unusual for one of our adult, as we call them, clients or students, just out of the blue to come up and give you a hug for no reason, unconditional. I was warned about this before I started teaching there. In fact, I was asked how I felt about hugs, and I said, well, they're human, they're healthful, and they're good. And they said good because some men have a problem about, people hugging them out of the blue, and these people will do that. So if you act offended, you're going to hurt their feelings. So I was always grateful for their kindness and unconditional goodness. About that time, I got a dog by the name of John Boy. I got him from the SPCA pet sales. They were having them underneath the outer front shelter area of a food, like a grocery store. And it was part of a shopping complex in the south part of the town where I lived. It's strange because that morning when I was shaving and getting ready to go out, for one, I needed to get a watch fixed or replaced that I bought at one of the stores there. And I found out they wouldn't replace it, they wouldn't fix it. It just wasn't their policy to. I hadn't mistreated the watch or anything. So, but while I'm shaving, getting ready to go to the store, I'm seeing cages of pets under this particular food world place, and thinking doesn't make sense. They don't sell pets there. What's going on? And I'm seeing this one particular dog in my mind, and I'm thinking, well, I don't understand this. Doesn't make sense. I got to the store where I bought the watch. I told you that didn't go over too well. I went down to the the food world, and I know I'm mentioning a name, and sure enough, there were cages there of dogs and cats, and I found out it was SPCA, and I saw this one dog, and I asked about him. They said, well, his name's John Boy, because facially he has sort of that sad look like the John Boy Walton character on the popular show, The Waltons, a show that was popular back in the 1970s. And so they let him out of the cage. He came over and gave me one sweet lick on my hand, just as Tiger, my Chihuahua mix, had done many years before. And the dog who did this looked exactly like that white dog I told you about 3 days or 3 nights after my Chihuahua passed on. Like I thought maybe it was his energy body sitting on my bed or whatever. This looked identical to John Boy. And it dawned on me, wait a minute, this is Tiger returned. Now, I want to bring up a point here. Animals can return and reincarnate just like we can. They can return during our same lifetime, and often do. This does not mean that every animal you ever get is a reincarnation of an animal you've previously had, but it can be, and it does happen. And animals are as free to determine when they're going to come back as we are. They're God too, just like we are, no less than. And so I adopted John as I got to where I called him, took him home with me. And one of the first things that kind of amazed me was he did just like Tiger did. He had his own pillow on the bed. I had 2 pillows, obviously, at the top of my bed. And he would lay down on his back with his head on the pillow, just like Tiger did. My other dogs since then had not done that. John Boy and I got to be like brothers. And I often told people he's my brother. Because I thought in many cases he was probably wiser than me. I say he's my big brother, even though he was a Westie, a White Scotty. The proper term is, I think, a White West Highlands Terrier. He was so intelligent that during the presidential elections, and I believe was it 91, we had a choice of either H. Ross Perot or Bill Clinton or George Bush Sr. For whatever his reasons, and to this day I don't know what they were based on, he really liked, of all 3 candidates, them, their wives, he liked George Bush Sr. and his wife the most. Whenever he would see either or both of them appear on TV, he'd stand up, wag his tail, and stare at them, ears up, happy as could be. The others he'd either snort at or turn his butt to. That wasn't my political preference, I can tell you right now. That was for Bill Clinton. Came the day of the election. I had taken John to the vets for a checkup. I took him once or twice a year for a checkup. And at one point, this man comes in with a little miniature poodle on leash. Female poodle. John Boy's staring over at the poodle, wagging his tail and panting. And he goes on like this. Finally, I said, John, do the words, "You're married, wife, lady," mean anything to you? Well, he had become very familiar with Sheltie mix, a beautiful black, sleek Sheltie mix by the name of Lady, as sweet and ladylike as you can be. Except when they were playing, and that's when Lady intended to win, period. But all of a sudden, John gets this sullen look on his face, like, uh-oh, kind of look. Looks over at the door, away from the poodle. A few minutes later, he starts turning his head back slowly around, and he looked back over the poodle and started panting again, ears up and tail wagging. And I said, "It's okay. It's all right, John. It's all right. I understand these things. We're all adults here. You know, I can understand how you're feeling. I don't blame you. And I won't say anything to the lady about it." And he got this, literally, this look on his face like, gave a big lick in the air. And I said, "For $50 a day, I can be very quiet."
Yeah.
And then he goes like that at me. Well, the guy with the poodle said, "It's almost like he understands everything you're saying." And I said, "It's because he does." I said, "If you don't believe me, ask him who his political preference is." So they went through the list. When H. Ross Perot was mentioned, John snorted. When Bill Clinton was mentioned, John snorted even harder. When George Bush was mentioned, Sr., he wagged his tail and was happy as could be. And I said, I don't know what his preference is based on. I have no idea. But he's really into this. And I told him, I said, "Tell you what, when we leave the vets, we'll go get pizza, and you can have some pizza with me tonight while we watch the election returns." And we did. Whenever we went to the vet, I tried to accompany it with something pleasurable. Normally we'd go to like Burger King or some other fast food place. Burger King was his favorite. And he'd get free food. He was so cute. The cashiers would go gaga over him. "Oh, what a cute dog." And next thing I know is they're bringing out a free burger to him. I have to pay for my food. He could wow anybody. So anyway, we went home that evening, watched the election returns, and every time they would show the numbers of different states, who's ahead in what state, and what this means, he'd turn his attention from the TV to me like, "What does that mean?" And I'd have to tell him. Finally, it became pretty obvious who was winning, and I said, "John, I don't know quite how to tell you this, and in a way I really hate to have to tell you this, even though my preference is different than yours politically." But I said, "It looks like Bill Clinton is going to be our next president. The numbers are showing that." And at that point, it's like you hit him with a brick almost. That didn't happen, but his reaction was this. He turned away from the TV, faced me, laid down on the couch, put his front feet out, and put his face down between them. For 2 whole weeks, he was very somber and unhappy acting. The night of the election, I told him I wish to God they would let animals vote, because you, for whatever your reason, you've been so interested in this, you've watched it like mad, and you have your own preference. I wish you could have voted. So, a little background on my best friend and brother, John Boy. He and Lady had pups, and we gave them away to loving homes. During the 80s, a number of things happened. At one point, I began taking a course called A Course in Miracles. I think I've already mentioned that previously and advised you that it's one of the best spiritual-oriented and metaphysical courses you will ever run across in this world. After that, or actually just during that time, in 1982, during my lunch period, I didn't have to go to lunch with my clients or students. Normally I would be either grading work that was done so I could give information to the school system or the HRS when it was needed, or I would be working on new assessment tools. I was asked by the by the Sheltered Workshop director to design and build an assessment tool. And I said, "Well, you can find those on the market." And she said, "Not for our types of students. And if we could, we couldn't afford it anyway." So she gave me 2 months to come up with one. I did it in a month's time. I guess they could still be using it to this day. They probably are. But this one day, I felt this presence. It wasn't Michael. And the only way I can describe this is it was like being Clark Kent, going to the phone booth, ripping off the Clark Kent disguise, and then going out of the phone booth and taking off into the air. The next things that would happen is I would be urged to pick up a piece of paper, which I had legal pads, and those yellow legal pads, and a pen. And all of a sudden something would start writing through me. And a cursive writing style that's not mine at all, and I don't even write in cursive. It was like somebody who owns a store. And then when the influence would finish, it was like going from Superman back to Clark Kent again. You know, Clark Kent's a nice guy, he's fine and everything, but it's more fun to be Superman. And because of the drastic difference in feeling, I just finally said enough of this. And I wouldn't allow any more of it to happen. That was in 1982. In 1985, I got a warning one day from Michael, who came to me when I was making up my bed one Saturday morning, his presence, and he said, something wonderful is about to happen. And I said, that sounds like something out of a movie, doesn't it? He said, all right, something amazing is about to happen. Are you happy now? And I just said, well, this doesn't make any sense. Don't bother me with this. And then he said, something is going to happen that is part of what you're about in this life, and you have to be ready to get online with it. And I said, well, I don't know what this is about. It's cryptic as some of the things you say are, and I don't need this. Then he said, if it'll make any greater proof for you, turn your radio on. You're going to find out that NASA just recently discovered a white dwarf star in your part of the galaxy, the section in the galaxy where it's extremely rare for this to happen. This will back up and prove what I'm telling you. And I thought, oh, brother, this is full of crap. But I went ahead and turned on the radio anyway. In about 2 minutes' time, as I was finishing making up the bed, the announcer stopped the program to say, and I quote, "We have an interesting announcement here. NASA has just recently discovered the presence of a white dwarf star in our sector of the galaxy, which is an extremely rare event." And I'm standing there thinking, oh my God. Then I got the feeling of Michael again and the words coming through, that dwarf star wasn't there before I told you. I shifted and changed time to make this possible. All I could think, the guy makes stars. Now we know who Michael is. A few months later, maybe just a month later actually, I met a friend who was trying to sell me a success motivation type package of self-improvement type work. And part of his spiel was to ask me what I was interested in. And I told him, of course, I love teaching. He had been teaching the use of computers for some of our staff members at the sheltered workshop where I was teaching, and I guess they put him on to me as someone who might be interested. So I told them, of course, they knew I was into metaphysics there anyway, and spirituality, spiritual growth and improvement. So I told him at the time, I said, well, I don't know, I draw stuff. I like to draw. And he said, great, what do you like to draw? And I said, otherworldly things and angels. And I said, I'm into metaphysics and psychic phenomena, and most importantly, spiritual growth and spirituality. And I said, and I channel. And he said, okay. He said, who do you channel? And I said, well, one of the beings I channel is the Archangel Michael. So he asked me to do a channeling for him, which lasted 2 hours, and Michael was actually answering his questions before he could even ask them. And the poor guy was sitting there gasping for breath most of the time. At any rate, he and I became friends. Very shortly after that, I'm showing him these pages that I'd folded up and put in my closet, and I took them out to show them to him. And he said, oh my God, you've got to go through it. You've got to continue this. This is amazing. You know who this is from? And I said, yeah, the highest source that could exist. And then he said, tell you what, when I leave this evening, promise me you'll sit with a pen and paper or a pencil and paper and see if anything will write through you at all. I grudgingly promised. I really didn't want to go back into that again. I didn't want to get started on that again. So I cheated. I got a piece of rough art paper and a real sharp pencil, knowing that the friction alone would not permit it to move around. But I could at least not lie and say I tried. The pencil moved and it wrote through me without any trouble whatsoever. Glad to see the two of you have gotten together. It's time to continue with this project if you wish. Thank you. And the signature, G.O.D. God. I showed this to my friend the next day and I said, this isn't anything to go on. It's just a couple of lines. Don't pay any attention to it. And he said, hey, this is great. This means that we can go on with this. You've got to do this. This is what you're supposed to do. And for 3 months in a row, every day, 7 days a week, we got together and a book called Keys. The original title, Keys, Love Letters from God, which I'm since changed the name of to Keys, Life Letters. They're not lovey-dovey, sweetsy love letters. Nothing gushy about them. They're practical. They're life letters on how to redefine the meaning of humanity, how to redefine our own identities as God. At first, we kept on with the old method of it would write through me, and the guy would be leaning over my shoulders looking at it and gasping and crying even at times from what he was reading. Then he said, why don't you let him speak through you? And I said, dude, this is what they lock people up in rubber rooms for. Letting him speak through me? And he said, well, it's just you and me just going to be part of this. No one's going to lock you up anywhere. He said, if you're letting it write through you, another form of expression is audio, vocal, like with a computer. It can print out or it can do vocal, audio. And so I didn't like being compared to a computer, but anyway. I said, all right, we'll try it, but at the first sign of trouble, or even, he said, okay, we'll stop it. I said, yeah, totally, not just, we won't go back to the paper either. Because I really didn't want to do this project. I don't know why, I just didn't. So here, without any trouble, the ultimate source speaks through me, hours at a time, because at times my friend would interrupt him and they'd get onto a different topic that had nothing to do with what was being written. And then we'd get back to that topic, and where I would have to have said, oh, wait a minute, where did we leave off? What was the last thing we said? The being coming through me didn't. I mean, sometimes it would be in the middle of an unfinished sentence, and he would just pick up like there'd never been an interruption and keep right on going. I have a good mind. My mind's not that great. So that's how Keys came to be. Now the next segment, we're going to take it from that and show what happened with that. And I guess that's about the end of this segment.
Okie dokie.